another episode of Spotlight. Spotlight is a podcast created by the Harlem School of the Arts Theater and Media and Design departments in Harlem, New York.
We interview some of the leading creative figures in New York City and bring you intimate interviews and insight from some of the most prolific figures in the creative industries.
Tonight, the spotlight is on Harlem's own Bevy Smith. Bevy is one of the most celebrated...
Thank you.
Bevy is one of the most celebrated figures in today's new media landscape, a Gracie Award winner among other high honors. She has been praised by one of the most iconic figures in America today, from Whoopi Goldberg to Gayle King.
She is the definition of fearlessness, and from fashion to broadcasting, she is a true multimedia powerhouse. Her recently released memoir, Bevelations, details her rise over the past 15 years to becoming one of Harlem's most celebrated media figures. Please welcome to the spotlight, Bevy Smith.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
So, for our first question, where did you originally get the idea to write a memoir, and who was your inspiration?
It's so weird. I literally wrote my memoir because my agent at the time was like, you should write a book. And I was like, okay. And literally for 2 years, she hounded me to start writing the book. And then one day she called me and she's like, come to my office and we're going to put together a one sheet so we can go out and sell your memoir. And I was like, okay. So I went to see her and I just talked to her about my journey. We put it on paper. And then I was like just minding my business, which is one of my favorite terms. So minding my business.
Me too.
And I got a call from my friend Andy Cohen. And he said, have you ever thought about writing a book? And I said, as a matter of fact, I just met with my agent and I just put together a one sheet. He was like, oh my gosh. He's like, well, can you come in and meet with me? Because I now have a publishing house. I have a book deal, and I would love to publish your book. And I was like, oh, okay. And voila, there's a book. There's a whole book here. So that's really how it came about. And my inspiration was, because this is the first book, but it will not be the last. And my inspiration from that is Maya Angelou, because she had, like 4 or 5 kind of memoirs, and that's my goal, to just have a stack of stories. And this one is kind of leaves off in a very kind of, we're in limbo, right? Because it leaves off in the pandemic. I finished editing my book during the pandemic, so I was able to include stories about the pandemic in the book. So I think my next book will take off from there, and it will have, what the next leg of my journey is.
It is called Bevelations, Lesson from a
Mother,
Auntie, Bestie. Okay, first off, how'd you come up with the name?
So Bevelations is the name of my radio show. So we knew we wanted to name it Bevelations. I have a radio show on Sirius XM. So we knew we wanted to kind of brand it with Bevelations. And then the lessons from a mother, auntie, bestie really came about because many times when people see me on TV, they feel connected to me. And it's either as they think of me as a mother figure, mother, not a mother, because I'm way too racy to be a proper mother. But they think of me as a mother figure, or they think of me, when it's young ladies, they think of me as an auntie, because no one over 35 can call me auntie. And then for women that are more like my contemporaries, they think of me as a bestie, someone they want to have a cocktail with or go on vacation with. And so these lessons that I've learned over the years is what is espoused in this book. So, yeah, as a mother, auntie, bestie.
As a mother, auntie, bestie. Yeah, I love that.
So what was one of the lessons you want people to take away from this book?
Oh, wow. Yeah, dare to dream. That's my big lesson. And also, kind of like my mantra in life is it gets greater later. So I don't believe the age should have any bearing on what you decide to do with your life. You should always be out there exploring. You should always try to follow your dreams and your passions. And we shouldn't let age dictate to us what we can and cannot do, which is why I love chatting with you guys, is because you're so young. And as I said to you when we were in the black box, I wanted to do what you guys are doing when I was a kid, but I didn't dare to dream. You know, and so I look at how brave you are. You're out there, and this school is helping you hone your skills, and it's just really inspirational. But then also I look at the fact that I'm 55 and becoming an actress, and how cool is that? And I'm not letting age stop me from that. And so it works both ways.
And you have mentioned before in the past as well in your book that you are a private person. So when questions come up that are like private questions, or ones that you are not so like, oh, that's surprising, are you always ready to answer them? Like you always have an answer for them, or is this...
I do try to kind of, well, because I interview people for a living.
Right.
So I kind of know how to navigate that kind of stuff. And, you know, it's funny because when my book came out in January of 2021, I was on the Wendy Williams show, and Wendy was still there at the time. And she asked me why I didn't name names in my book about certain relationships that I had. And I said, well, because it's not about that. It's about me. It's about my growth and me understanding who I am. And she tried to prod me to get me to, and I was just like, no, I'm not going to do it. Like, I'm not going to fall for that, right?
Yeah.
And then she just started naming people. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. So I'm really very good with setting boundaries in that way. And as we talked about earlier, I'm also not at all interested in being famous.
Right.
I want to do my good work, and I want to be known for doing good work. And I like the perks of celebrity, but I don't actually want to be a celebrity. You know, there's a difference. It's like, you can kind of like, you know, have like little perks of it, like I was discussing with you guys earlier, but you don't have to be someone where you can't walk down the street. You need bodyguards, or, you know, you can't just kind of live your life the way you want to. So, yeah.
You made a good point of that before, Madison. I don't know what you said, but it was just...
She wants her own privacy.
Yeah, just private enough.
Yeah, just, you know, be able to live my life nicely, do the work, get rewarded for it, and keep it pushing.
So let's take it back a little bit. You were only 18 years old when you started in the high fashion industry. How were you able to get that job?
Oh, this is a really good story, but it's not, well, I don't know how good it is to tell children this.
Try to keep it like, maybe like PG-13.
Well, no, it's definitely PG-13. It's not racy. It's just underhanded. So this is back in the day. This is the 80s. And back in the 80s, there were no real, they didn't really have computers. They certainly didn't have the World Wide Web. And so if you wanted a job, traditionally you would call up to a company. You would have read about a job opening in a newspaper, and then you would pick up the phone and call and say you want to apply for the job. They would have you come in, you would fill out an application. So I was a temp receptionist at an advertising agency that specialized in luxury fashion. So when people called in about the job, they were talking to me. And I told those nice people that the job was filled. And so when my when the office manager came to me and said, Beverly, we have not been getting any calls about the listing that we have for the receptionist, and you're doing so well, would you like the job? And I said, yes, I would. And that's how I got the job.
So, like, maybe the ends justify the means.
It definitely did. It definitely did. But I don't want you guys to learn about subterfuge and fibbing.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
You were just mentioning, like, you know, electronics and stuff, and this is, how do you feel about, you know, there's obviously perks and not perks about electronics nowadays.
Social media and things
Social
like that.
media.
Yeah.
Okay, without letting all the negativity get there, how would you want kids to or not kids, but others get around that and be able to steer away from the negativity?
Yeah, yeah, it's a lot of it, right? I think one of the biggest issues that we have with social media, not with just young people, but with all people, is that we live in a very photoshopped world. So everyone's super perfect on the social media, right? Everyone's got the best skin, the best, hair, the best shape, the best everything, and they're living their best lives and all the things, which we know is not the truth half the time, more than half the time. And so one of the most dangerous things about social media is that it kind of encourages people to compare themselves to others. And we shouldn't be doing that, To compare is to despair. As I said before, we all run our own race, and we all have our own journey. So we should not be looking at someone and coveting what that person has. We should be looking at our lives and saying, well, what do I want my life to look like? And if you're dissatisfied with your life, how can I make it better? How can I improve it? Not so that it can be as good as X, Y, and Z's life, but just so it can be the life that you want, and it should have nothing to do with what someone else has. And I think that that's one of the biggest problems on social media. And there have been studies that prove that young people are really susceptible to this. You guys battle, not you guys, but young people are battling with self-esteem issues largely and due to social media. And that's a real issue.
And so, as for your career-wise, how was the transition from high fashion to radio?
Well, it was high fashion to TV.
Okay.
So I actually am a TV person who does radio, not a radio person who does TV. Because you can be that. Wendy Williams was a radio person who did TV. So I did 10 years of TV before I ever got on the radio show.
Okay.
But the way I transitioned from being in the fashion business to being on television is that I actually became a fashion expert on TV. So I didn't leave my, at that point, 20 years of expertise in fashion. I didn't leave it on the side of the road. I said, oh no, this can take me to where I want to go. I want to be on TV. How do I get on TV and not be on a reality show, beating somebody up, cursing somebody out, dousing them with a cocktail? I said, oh, I can be on TV as a fashion expert. And so that's how I made the transition. So my old life fueled my new one.
So you are a pioneer. You are. So you started your professional career at 18.
Mm-hmm.
What can you say to soon-to-be pioneers? What can you say to them, or give them at least a little advice that you wish you would have gotten before you just went onto the train and went?
Oh, yeah. Well, not so much from when I was a kid, when I started my career. By the way, I started being a receptionist right out of high school, and then I doubled back in my early 20s, and I went to college. I attended NYU. And that was interesting, right? To do it that way, to go to school at night versus kind of having the traditional kind of college life. It was really interesting on a lot of different levels. So I don't regret that, but it was definitely, okay, well, that's a different kind of journey. And I think probably if I had to do anything all over again, I probably would have went away to school. I would not have gone, even though NYU obviously is an excellent school, but I think I would have probably gone away to school, and I probably would have gone to a HBCU because it just looks like a lot of fun. And whenever I go and speak at HBCUs, I'm always like, ooh, I would have slayed this. But yeah, so that's one thing. Another thing I think I would tell young people, I wish I had known, was that, just because you're really good at something doesn't mean that's all you can do. I learned that on my own. I wish someone had told me that, because I literally was very restless. I began to be restless in my advertising career at the age of like 29, 28. There was a rumbling. I was like, oh, I kind of want to do something different. But I was so good at advertising. So, who gives up something that they're really good at, that they make great money, and that's also a really great, glamorous career? My career in fashion was sitting front row at fashion shows and traveling to Paris and Milan. Like, you don't really, who gives that up, right? I couldn't even, but I knew I was restless, and I knew I wasn't happy. So I didn't give it up. And it took me until I was 38 to make the change. And then that's when I finally got the memo. Just because I'm really good at this doesn't mean that I won't be really good at something else. And so I left that, and I became this TV personality, and I'm really good at that. And now I'm leaving that space, and I'm going into acting, and I'm going to be really good at that.
You can foresee the future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, but that's one of the great things about becoming an adult and really kind of doing the work on yourself, is that you do begin to have a really great sense of confidence and knowing who you are and knowing your abilities and your capabilities, right? Like, I think that oftentimes we don't know who we are, and so then we don't really, we look to other people to tell us who we are and what we're good at and what we should be doing. I don't do that, so I keep my own counsel. That's one of my favorite terms. I keep my own counsel. And, also one of my favorite quotes from Willie Shakespeare, a.k.a. William Shakespeare, the bard, is, "To thine own self be true." And I'm really true to thine own self. I've nailed that. I'm really true to myself.
Now, how do you stay true to yourself, like, in your daily life?
I do this thing called taking your temperature. So I take my temperature, and I see how I'm feeling. Like, so on Monday, I mentioned to you guys, on Monday, I interviewed 5 guests for my radio show. It was like Anthony Anderson, Elizabeth Moss, Terry Crews, I forget what, but like 5 people back in rapid succession. And because it was that many people, and because everyone has a TV show out, a book, a blah, 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 that's a lot of research. But I have a producer. So I could have just relied on my producer to give me the questions and not worry about it. But to thine own self be true. So I didn't want to phone it in. I want to be true to myself. Maybe they would have noticed, maybe they wouldn't have. But I would have known that I hadn't done my homework. And so that's what I mean when I say I take my temperature. I'm like, yes, I'm going to have to stay up super late that night. Oh my gosh, no, I can't go out that night for dinner because the next day is going to be hectic. But that's okay, because I'm being true to myself, and I know that I want to show up and do an incredible job, because these people are taking time out of their day. They're exhausted. They've been talking to people all day long. They don't want someone to just show up and, so tell me about your movie. That's one of the laziest things you can ever do as an interviewer. Tell me about your movie. How did you pick the project? You don't want to ask those questions, especially not if someone's been doing that. They've been answering those questions all day long. I will tell you, sometimes I do ask those questions, because sometimes I'm tired, child. But I try not to. I try to avoid that. That's why my show is called Bevelations, because I want it to be a revelation. I want you to get something different and new out of it.
Yeah, and you carry yourself with so much power, and that is so inspiring.
Thank you.
So, were you always aware of your power, or was that something that you had to find?
Thank you for that. And I was not. I was really shy, and I was a nerd, and I was bullied. And as a matter of fact, the first time I ever changed my life, which really kind of fueled this entire life that I have now. First time I changed my life was when I was 14 years old. As you guys know, in New York City, you get to select which high school you want to go to. And I was in the cool girl club crew, but I was the low girl on the totem pole. So like, I was with them, but I was like in service to them. Like, Bev, I left my wallet. Can you give me $1 so I can get French fries? Sure. Bev, can you like go and ask the teacher if I can have extra time for my? Sure. Like, I was in service. And eventually I was like, I'm in service to these people. I'm not really a part of the crew. I'm like a handmaiden. So I was like, well, I don't want to live my life like that. And so when it was time to go select a high school, the popular girls, they all decided in the lunchroom that we were going to select this one particular high school, and everyone was going to go, and we were all going to apply for that high school. But I applied for a different high school and did not tell them. And then when I got into that high school, I knew I was set, because I was like, oh, I will not be in the shadow of these girls, and I can reinvent myself, because I'm going someplace where no one knows me. And I get a chance to be who I see myself as being. And so I went to the different high school, and it literally worked. I became a popular girl, but not a mean popular girl. But I began to understand my power, and that was at the age of 14. But I continually have changed my life in that way. It's always been like, it happened at 28, then it happened at 38. And then it happened at like now 54, and so it's always an evolution, but it's really, really great. And so, yeah, so I was not always aware of my power. I was not always like, kind of outward facing. I was really very shy.
And so what are some of the most important elements for maintaining success that you have come to learn in this industry?
Do the work, do the work, do the work. There's no avoiding doing the work. The work begats work. So if you show up and show out and do not what you're supposed to do, but go above and beyond, you will be successful. Also, being gracious to people. When you are talent, you go on sets and people cater to you. But this is a collaborative business. So everyone's job is important. Just because you might be, on the top of the call sheet doesn't make you any more important than the production assistant, or the intern. Like, you have to treat people with grace, because you just never know, right? Like I told you guys, when I hosted the American Black Film Festival short film contest with HBO, Ryan Coogler of Black Panther fame was the winner of that. Now, at that point, I'm Bevy Smith, and he is like some guy who did a short film. He's not a famous person, but I was incredibly gracious to him because why not? And he was also very talented. And now, of course, he's Ryan Coogler of Black Panther. But what if I had been like not so gracious? That wouldn't be good for me. That wouldn't be good for me as someone who has since had to interview him. That wouldn't be good for me as someone who's now pursuing acting. And what happens when I get an audition for one of his projects? And if I was not a gracious person, he'd be like, yeah, I'm not that one. Not a nice person. Get off. You know what I mean? So you just never know. So I say, do the work, be gracious and kind. And also, I think one of the other biggest keys is like just being true to yourself and taking your temperature. Because something that was once your dream, you can evolve. Your dreams can evolve. So you can't be stuck on that like, oh, this is what I wanted to do for so long and now I'm doing it, so I have to do that. No, you should grow and evolve.
What was one of the biggest challenges you faced on your road to where you are now? Because you've been on so many roads.
Yeah, I think probably the biggest challenge is quitting my job at Rolling Stone magazine, where I was like the only woman in the management of sales, and I was the only black person in management, and I was making really good money, and I quit with this knowledge that I wanted to pursue TV, and I actually was able to do it immediately, but I started doing TV, but I didn't start getting paid to do TV for years. So in the middle of all of that, I was broke. And that was a hard journey, to go from making, really great mid six-figure salary to like having to go to housing court and having to figure out how you're going to stretch a can of salmon so that you can have a meal for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That was tough. So in my book, that's the chapter I call Broke But Blissful. So because I was doing everything that I set out to do, I just wasn't making any money at it. But I was really happy. I was just broke. Yeah, broke but blissful.
Broke but blissful.
And so you've been at the top, you're still at the top. So what do you think keeps you grounded?
My community. I could have moved out of Harlem a long time ago. And I choose to stay here because it does ground me. I choose to stay here because I realized very early on that kids needed to see me. When I worked at Vibe magazine, I was the fashion and beauty advertising director, and kids would see me in the magazine, and they'd be like, I saw you in the magazine, Miss Beverly. And I was able to mentor children. I was able to go to their schools and speak. I was able to help kids get internships and things like that. When I was growing up, I didn't see people like myself. I saw them when they came to my school for like career day, which is nice, but it's nothing like being able to touch a person that's doing something that you think you dream of doing. And so these kids in my community can touch me. They see me. They see me on TV, and then they see me in the hallway. They see me on TV, or they hear me on the radio, or they see me in a magazine, and then they see me in the grocery store. And that means that what I'm doing is not so far off. Like what I'm doing, you can do it too. You see I'm right here, right?
Yeah.
I'm tangible. So I think that's what's really helped me is being true to my community and to my culture. So even in the very white world of high-end fashion, I was always very aware that I was enough and that I had nothing to prove, and that my culture, where I came from, Harlem is a place where some of the most iconic style and well-dressed folks hail from. So I was very aware of that. So when I go to Milan and Paris, I'm not like, oh my God, the French is so chic. I'm like, that's cute, but I got chic friends that's on 125th Street too. It's a different type of chic, but it's chic nonetheless. So, yeah, my community has grounded me.
Yeah, and can you tell us about growing up in Harlem? What are some things that you look back to on your childhood and you can just smile at? Like you can look at other people's stuff and you're like, oh, cool, but when it comes to your childhood, what's something you can look back at and it just warms you up?
Well, I was a nerdy kid, like I mentioned, so I loved the Schomburg Library. I would love to go to the Schomburg, and we had this thing called microfiche, and it was like just little slides, and you could look at old newspaper clippings and things. Like you guys now have everything on the internet. But we had like this little machine, you had to thread it, but then you could see like newspapers from like the 1800s, 1700s, microfiche. It was amazing. And the Schomburg has one of the largest collections of black history and just original papers from everyone from Arturo Schomburg to Langston Hughes to Baldwin. I mean, before they built what I call the Blacksonian, which is I think it's the African American Museum, the one in D.C. I just call it the Blacksonian. Before they built the Blacksonian, the Schomburg really was the keeper of most of those historic papers. And so imagine being a kid and knowing that 15 blocks away from where you live, it's like one of the greatest treasure troves of black culture and history. So that's one of the things I remember about growing up in Harlem. Also, too, because I grew up during the 70s when it was very much a Black Power movement, it was really cool because every day in my classroom was Black history. So it was always, every classroom was papered with information about not just like Harriet Tubman, but, we learned about Benjamin Banneker, like, at the age of 6, and we learned about all these incredible figures in Black history, but every single day, not just in February. And we also learned Swahili. And so when I went to Tanzania 2 or 3 years ago, well, more than that because of the pandemic, but about 4 years ago, I went to Tanzania, and they speak Swahili in Tanzania. And so I was like, jumbo, you know what I mean? I was like, I learned that when I was 6. But it was really cool to have that. And it was because, I grew up in this beautiful, very Black community. And it really did shape me. It gave me confidence, too, to go into these spaces and know that I was enough. Growing up in this kind of community was great.
So what mindset do you have now that you're walking into a new chapter of life?
Yeah.
I'm very optimistic. I'm super excited about it. I just did a TED Talk 2 weeks ago. Actually practiced my TED Talk here,
So welcome back.
which was so cool. And, it was awesome to go into a space where no one knew who I was. Had never seen me on TV, had never listened to me on the radio, never seen me in the magazine. It's very cool. Some people like to go places where everybody know, you guys don't know this, but there's an old TV show called Cheers, and the theme song is, sometimes you want to go where everybody knows your name.
Yeah.
I actually don't want to go where everybody knows my name. I want to go where people don't know my name because I like the sense of discovery. I like discovering people. I like people to discover me. And being at TED with like the top minds across the globe, and Bill Gates was in the same session as me, and Elon Musk spoke the following day, and former Vice President Al Gore was there, and there were like all these people that were there. That was so cool. And so at the age of 55, I'm still being discovered, and I'm still discovering. And that's what I think that this next chapter is for me. I always say, when I quit my job at Rolling Stone, I said it was with the idea that every day should be an adventure. And when I resigned, I told my boss I was going to quit to write, to sing, to dance, to act, to fire eat, to juggle, to jump out of a plane, to, to be a fire eater, whatever it is that I wanted to do, I was going to at least pursue it. And I'm happy to say that in the last year, I pursued acting, and I also was an art consultant on a film called Swan Song, starring Mahershala Ali, and I was the art curator. So I selected the art that was in the film, and that's something I've always wanted to do. And my next big moment will be, I'm also very passionate about architecture. I literally travel the world for architecture, so I'll be doing something in that space as well.
And what's your favorite, place in the world that has the best architecture?
Wow, that's a toughie. I love the surrealism of Barcelona because of Gaudi.
She just went to Barcelona.
You just went? Wasn't that cool?
Loved it.
So let me tell you what I want to do. So I don't know if I told you guys this, but I have a dinner party business called Dinner with Bevy. And so my goal is to do a dinner party at Park Güell, and I want to do a children's dinner party there. How much fun would that be, right?
So
We're
beautiful.
children.
I know, you're children. You'll be invited.
We're children. We are still
I went to
children.
Park Well, and it was even though it was a little
It's so
rainy,
fun.
it was very beautiful.
Yes.
And the little houses and the
Uh-huh.
designs that Gaudi did, it was nice.
It's very cool. So that was one of my favorite places in the world for architecture. Also, believe it or not, like Chicago has, I'm obsessed with mid-century modern. There's a lot of Frank Lloyd Wright houses in Chicago and in the surrounding areas. So I like to go to Taliesin. I usually like to go to Taliesin West, which was his campus where he taught and, kind of did his work and stuff like that. So, yeah, and that's another side of me that people don't know. So people are still going to be discovering things about me. Even now, I'm 55 and there's new stuff coming out.
Yeah.
It's a peeling of the old onion, you know? It's like, yeah. But you have to be, I think you have to be comfortable with not letting people just see you in one way.
Yeah.
Firing on one cylinder. I don't want to fire on one. I spent a lot of years firing on one cylinder. And I don't want to do that anymore.
Thank you so much for answering our questions.
Yes.
But we are going to be leading questions to the guest here.
Okay.
So, a little Q&A time right now.
I'm into it.
If anyone has any
If
questions.
anyone has any questions.
Who's got a question?
Who's got a question?
Don't be shy.
Seriously? Oh.
I don't bite.
If not, I'll ask more
Oh,
questions.
hello, kind sir.
Oh. We
Oh,
have
there's a
mic.
mic
We
coming.
have- we
Harper's
have
got a mic.
We have a mic.
Hello, and thank you for coming here. I was wondering, you said your agent wanted you to write the book, and then they had asked you previously to write a book, but you didn't write it before then,
Yeah,
but you did write it at a certain point.
yeah.
I guess I'm fascinated by relationships between agents and talented people. What made you say, okay, I want this person to represent me? What made you stick with that person? What made you not write the book before then, and what made you write the book after they said so?
Okay.
What did you make guide your career?
Okay, that's a lot. So wait, you're going to keep that mic because you're going to prod me. So the first thing is, CAA saw me do an interview with Shonda Rhimes, Kerry Washington, I actually interviewed the cast, Tony Goldwyn of Scandal. And the CAA representatives were there. And when I got off that stage, a friend of mine who worked at CAA was like, Bevy, you know, my colleagues are interested, and they want to know if you would be interested in having a conversation about us repping you. And I was like, okay. I was minding my business. And so that's how I went with CAA, and I had an incredible agent. My agent for film and TV, separate from my book agent. So my film and TV agent was a gift. I'm a young woman who was smart, who saw me, who didn't just think of me as the fashion girl, who saw me kind of like in totality. And so she was really great, and she understood what I would do and would not do, career-wise. And then my book agent, they want to wrap you up with everything. So all the big agencies have book agents, they have speaking engagement agents, they don't want you to go to anywhere else. They want all your money. So, but my book agent was actually an amazing woman as well, and got me. And so when she told me to come in 2 years after she had first said you should write a book, when she told me to come into the agency, we sat down and I just told her my story, and she took notes. And then she typed up the one page. And then that's what we were going to take out into the world. But then we got a really great offer, so we didn't have to take it out in the world. And that was pretty cool. And then what were the other questions?
How much does an agent act as your guide in your career?
A good one should be your partner.
And you have a good one.
I don't anymore. She actually quit the business. She has her own amazing online exercise platform called Obey. And it's going incredibly well. I actually went to speak at Obey during the pandemic, so we're still friends. But she left a lot of her amazing talent in the lurch. And then I went to another agency and didn't like them, so I fired them during the pandemic. So now I'm agentless, but that's
What
fine.
was it that you were like, this is agency's not for me? I don't like this is not for me.
They were not very proactive. So for me, as someone who knows a lot of people in the business, and who is a really good negotiator, I need my agent to be better than me at those things. And if you're not, I don't need to be working with you. It's fine.
Do we have more questions?
Oh,
We do. We do have a question.
I'm looking around because I want the
there-
students to have their opportunity first.
Oh, okay.
Is there any student?
I always talk to the students. They're like, we heard this lady talk.
So first and foremost, I want to say thanks for remaining here. When I say here, I mean Harlem, and for being here today with the students. I remember the Vibe magazine. I remember your early days in the early mid-2000s doing interviews on those shows that only came on, once a week or once a month. And
Yep.
so it's nice to see the progression. I also want to say that you mentioned something about your opportunity from from temp to full-time receptionist. And I wanted to say to the students that you weren't telling them any example of how to, you weren't encouraging subterfuge or lying. You were encouraging them and showing them by example how to take an opportunity, to think outside of the box that anybody built for you, and to take advantage of it, to identify and then take advantage of an opportunity presented. So I appreciate that you shared that story. You also mentioned something about having multiple abilities and not being afraid to reinvent yourself from time to time, and separating from your high school squad in order to expand into your fuller self. We have high school students, high school seniors here that certainly need to hear that message and it being reinforced, and then for you to share that at the age you are now, you're still doing that. I, as an adult myself, am just affirmed and encouraged in terms of moving forward. So just shout out to you for being, repping Harlem lifelong. And my last question is not really a question, can you give the students a quote from your book that you think would be beneficial for them to carry?
Well, let's look at the old book.
He said, let's open the Bible.
It is right there.
Let's see. My one chapter that I wrote during, that was never supposed to be in the book, because I got the book deal prior to the pandemic, but I had to write it. Well, my dad died at the beginning of the pandemic, so pandemic starts March 13th is when we shut down. My dad died on April 11th, and so that changed the tone of the book, certainly towards the end. But I have a chapter called A Pandemic, Race Relations, Getting Comfortable. And so I say in this chapter, we may as well embrace the unknown, revel in it. Y'all know that old saying, want to see God laugh, make a plan? Well, I'm no longer tethered to a plan. This book has been revised to include mentions of the pandemic and the protests against police brutality. But the part about being comfortable with being uncomfortable and getting rid of the idea of having a plan, well, that was in the book prior to Trump telling folks to ingest household cleaning fluid. When you're adventurous and challenging yourself, carpe diem it right up to the end, in search of the bespoke version of a good life, that's when you're really living. Plan all you want, but if you're doing it right, you won't hesitate to veer off down the road without knowing where it ends. And I just opened up the book. I ain't even had that prepared. Go figure. But that's a sign of a book that you enjoy. Like if you can just open it and find something nice for yourself. So I'm very proud of that I was able to do that, and under the duress that I was under too. Finishing something in a pandemic while grieving was not an easy thing. I, like most of you, just wanted to watch Tiger King and make banana bread. But I was not able to do that. I had a lot of work to do. And so I learned a lot during that time. Strength. I think we all did, right? We all kind of learned just how strong we are and about how we were able to pivot. Yeah.
Okay.
All
Questions? Come on.
I think we're done.
Do we have?
Or do we even want to? A repeater.
All right, one last question.
What is your dream acting project?
Oh, thank you. My dream acting project, and I told the young people this earlier, when I first quit my job, I went to a one-woman writing workshop. And I actually already have chapters of a one-woman show written. I'm going to revisit that. I'm going to do my one-woman show. Theater is, to me, the end-all and be-all when it comes to being a performer, entertaining. I just love the idea that every time you get up there, you're flying by the seat of your pants. I like the idea of it always changing and morphing. You always discovering something new when you're up on that stage. So that's a big goal of mine. And then I was saying to the young people, I'm not interested in becoming a star. I would love to have a really great, solid career as a character actor. I wanna have a nice, quiet, lovely life. I don't want to, I want to be able to live my life. And I think that character actors move stories along. I think that they are the journey people of the business, and I want to be a part of that tribe.
Thank you for joining
Thank you,
us.
literally.
Thank you,
so much for
guys.
joining us, Bevy Smith.
Thank
Round
you
of
so
applause,
much.
everyone.
So fun.
Yeah, seriously. And again,
Wonderful time.
Yeah, and again, my name is Ayana Milkis. I'm with the theater program.
I'm Madison Malachi. I'm also with the theater program.
And
Such an
also,
honor.
can we please give a shout out to our camera crew right now? Seriously.
From the
Thank
media
you.
and
Thank
design
you from the
group.
media design. And as well as our station right here, lights, amazing. Thank you,
Amazing.
Sarah. Thank you.
The whole production. Thank you so much for
Thank
having
you so
me.
much for
coming.
being here.
I feel very honored. Thank you.
You were wonderful.